Well, first of all, as always, thank you for sticking with us. I'm hoping there was some great information that came through from the breakouts. We're going to kind of keep things moving, trying to stay on track. As awkward as it is, I'm introducing myself. So what I'm going to focus on today is the concepts around data protection. And what I mean by data protection is we already know there's a need for it. There's already some tool sets that you've already heard about using these tools as a framework for service abstraction. Why can't security, end-to-end data protection be one of those services that we can now evolve and change based on these tool sets that you've heard about this morning? So what I want to do is to spend the next 30 minutes talking to you about where we see data protection, why we think it's more so of an evolutionary type of scale today more than ever before. And based on that, I can get through the slides here, is Brocade has spent the last 12 months or so really kind of getting a new lay of the land as it pertains to data protection and really trying to get an understanding, agency by agency, how folks really feel from an IT professional standpoint about how well their environments are protected and how they feel about the level of criticality associated with that protection. So what I want to talk about is some of the perceptions that we were able to build and obtain over the last handful of weeks, some recommendations, and how do we map some of these tool sets that we've talked about regarding underlays and overlays, and how we can extract a true multi-vendor, multi-product, end-to-end data protection strategy that leverage some of these next-generation software tool sets. Obviously, what does the future hold? And a very brief call to action. What are some of the things that we as IT professionals should be taking a look at to help out some of the business leaders within our particular areas of focus? And as we look at some of these much larger managed services programs that we know are hitting the street, how do we provide a very strong data protection story around these new managed services or cloud-based services initiatives? So, the criticality of network security. How critical do we view it to be? So what we did was we took a survey about 3 months ago where we actually identified 200 potential IT professionals from 60 different federal agencies. And the goal here was to obtain input from folks at the CIO level, mid-management from a technology standpoint, as well as folks that are basically doing this job day in, day out. And we asked them a set of questions regarding how they felt about if their network is secure effectively. The results are actually quite interesting because you had kind of two separate areas. We were on both sides of the fence. We had about a fourth of the people that we spoke to said, hey, for my particular agency, I believe that we are relatively secure is how we protect our data. We are fully secure and we are very comfortable with what we were able to deploy. Then we also had another quarter of people who basically said, we do very little, if anything at all, in our data protection schema. And then obviously there's people that kind of fit somewhere in the middle. So we kind of took it to the next level to ask the question of why. Why do we see such a dispersed level of folks and how they feel about network security? Okay. And the reason why we ask this question is because we're seeing a huge change within the industry, and we're talking about it over the course of the morning. What are some of the things that are driving this heightened concern about end-to-end data protection? Well, number one, obviously, is the migration to the cloud, whether it be public cloud constructs that are currently being connected to and leveraged as far as delivering applications to, or it's some of the hybrid and private cloud deployments that you guys are designing and building to engulf a set of applications, okay? The volume of information as these applications start to move in and out of the cloud is going to be quite significant. There's going to be more entry points where data is touched more so than ever before, to the point of, think about the last 20 years, right? Where we were in 96, where basically 2,700 websites today well over 1 billion. 100 million cell phones, now well over 3 billion. Being able to keep control of the individual points of presence from a security standpoint is horrifically challenging. And the question is, what can I now do to automate my processes? Think about a much bigger view. Leveraging these, how do I then trust and to solidify from a data protection standpoint some of these cloud-based initiatives? Also, the evolution of networking of things, based on what I just mentioned. With so many endpoints, so many ways into environments, what can I do to at least give myself some level of data protection control? So, one of the questions that we provided to the 200 folks we spoke to were priorities. What are the priorities from an IT standpoint? The folks we got back were basically 3 major buckets. Bucket A was prevention. Bucket B was identification. And bucket C was remediation. And which one of those buckets that they thought was most important? And the results that we received was as follows, where basically 75% of the people we spoke to says, hey, I've got to prevent it from the front door. It's bottom line, I've got to have a level of prevention in place right out of the gate. If I identify it once it's there, it's already there. I'm going to have some malicious activity that's going to happen. I've got to catch it earlier than that. So obviously that's where the focus is, which is well understood, and we're moving forward with that. And what they actually took it to the next level and said, look, the funding that I'm receiving from an IT standpoint is focused on that prevention. What are some of the mechanisms that I have at my disposal to focus more on prevention versus identification and remediation, which is great. But then the next question is, all right, are you protecting the data on your network? If so, yes or no, or why not? And again, it's very interesting where folks kind of took a step back and said, we are at certain strategic points. All right, can you define a strategic point? Some did, some didn't. So there was a lack of understanding from a data protection standpoint exactly where we're actually protecting data and how we're protecting it. And if you look at the folks who said, hey, we do something, which is great, but the others that were not doing anything or very little said, I'm not because of these reasons that they listed here. Obviously, number one was dollars. I am now looking at data protection as a trade-off, which I thought was quite surprising, where there was comments that said, look, based on services and my delivery of those services to my consumer, I admit it, I turn security off. Now, granted, I know I have sticks to meet, and I know I have things to do, but I have a mission. I have to deliver services to my consumer. And when I see massive performance degradation, certain things I've got to tweak. That's where I am today. Number two was related to performance as a whole. When I apply a security strategy to what I'm doing, my performance goes down by 10%, 15%, 30%. I can't have that, so I normally turn these types of tools off or change them in some way. And then there's obviously some incompatibilities, complexities, lack of internal resources to manage these environments, and then obviously lack of bandwidth capacity. These are some of the things that came up in the survey from these IT professionals saying, hey, these are my challenges. This is what I'm working towards. So these are all valid. They're all well understood, but they can't be barriers for us as IT professionals, right? We still have to provide a strategy. We need a set of tools that can help us get around some of these barriers that we know are there, and they've been around for a very long time. So this is where it got interesting. So we understood the challenges. We understood why they're having a hard time deploying some of these end-to-end data protection strategies. But then we're like, well, okay, for those who believe they're doing something, what are you doing? And 60% said, hey, I support SSL for my web-based applications. That's pretty much what we do. And my response was, is that it? A lot of folks responded in the affirmative. Yes, we believe that's our primary protection strategy of securing our web-based applications. As we all know, guys in the room and gals in the room, that's only a very small minute of something much bigger. Look at the latest things that are on the news right now about the latest breach. It was a database breach. If it wasn't a web-based tool, they got in a different way and affected traffic that was not web-based traffic. So we have to do more than just simply securing some of the web-based front ends that was listed in the survey. Even more disturbing, to me anyway, in my opinion, was the bottom numbers at the bottom. 9% of the people surveyed says, I don't know what we do. So we're looking at technologists, our folks here in the room who are in charge of providing effective security to the IT solutions we deploy, and their response to it, well, what are you doing? And their response is, I really don't know. Obviously, we need to change that mindset right off the bat. We have to come up with something. And the number 2 is 9% said, hey, yeah, we're doing some form of encryption, but it's 64-bit web-based stuff. And I don't know about you guys in the room, but I haven't seen a 64-bit web-based browser since like the late 90s. I just haven't. But yet we see this stuff in our networks today used quite extensively. And that, too, has to be changed sooner versus later, but that's what we have. Now, there may be a level of embarrassment that they want to air your dirty laundry about some of these tools that we're using, but if we don't talk about it, if we don't come up with ideas around how do we fix it, we become more reactive and we don't have the opportunity to be proactive. And this is why more now than ever, we have to elevate this conversation for these types of responses. Now, also there was a conversation about encryption in flight and encryption at rest and encryption strength. And people have the tendency to focus on 128-bit strength, encryption strength, as well as 256. And the conversations of Suite B came up as well. And I know everyone in the room, most everyone is familiar with what Suite B is. But it was amazing that we saw these very limited numbers of what they were doing, but yet in the survey, 82% of the folks we said hey, we're going to Suite B. It's happening across these individual agencies to some degree, but they wouldn't elaborate on what that is. Is it consistent? Is it uniformed? Is it based on a model or a set of data sets where the encryption strength is just a component of it? We didn't get a lot of feedback regarding that. Why? Maybe because it's just a buzzword today. Maybe that's what my boss told me that I need to do. The question is, how do I do it? We need to talk amongst each other on how we address that how question. Because we have a framework out there. We've seen this. I know folks that have looked at encryption and looked at what the commercial solutions for classified initiative is centered around. Really makes a lot of sense. Why? Consistency. What is the NSA doing with this particular program? What they're doing is giving us an a la carte list for those who are taking a very closer look at data protection. Whether it be a centralized certificate authority, whether it be a set of VPN solutions, whether it be another set of security data sets such as firewalls, IDS, IPSs. This framework is looking at all of these components. And they're setting a set of standard parameters that has to be there associated with this framework. So us as IT professionals now have a menu where I can now look at a data protection strategy. I have a framework that has been established by the CSFC initiative. And I also have a short list of products across multiple vendors that we can now pick and choose that have the baseline requirements embedded and available and verified today that you can now use. It can be Brocade or any other vendor that you believe you'll prefer. But the framework is there, and that's what makes this initiative to me so compelling. So yes, your bosses may want to migrate to Suite B because they sat in a CIO or CTO meeting and that word came up and everybody like, yep, got to have it. But now we can put some meat on the bones and see how we can apply that technology and others into a very organized and unified way, which I believe is very powerful, more so today than ever, given the volume of our scale-out initiatives within our data centers, the scale-up requirements within our enterprises, as well as the multi-endpoints within our wide area connections between locales, whether it be tactical in theater or out of theater, or remote locations or remote offices or folks within the HQ arena. Okay? This framework really is kind of laying a framework for that. And it's not new for those who are not familiar with the program. We're in year 3 when it comes to this particular effort. That approved list has some very nice products on it. So if you haven't seen it, I urge you to go take a look at the website, nsa.gov, and actually do a search on CSFC, and it gives you an identification of the framework, what they believe is the best approach moving forward, and there's a capabilities package that kind of lays out, here's the framework, here are the products, this is how we would recommend you use them. It's totally up to you to figure out how you want to deploy them, but yet at least you have a starting point. So please keep that in mind. Recommendations moving forward. Again, we understand there's a need. We understand that we need a strategy. Let's be more proactive versus reactive. We understand we have challenges regarding budget and interoperability and things of that nature, but we also need to understand and be real with ourselves of what we have. Because I also found another data point quite compelling. One of the questions in the survey was focused on, well, if you're doing data protection, what are you doing? Give us an idea. And 70% said we are using firewalls and access control lists. That's what we're doing across the board. And we think we're okay. Guys, we know what a firewall does. It provides access in and access out at very strategic points. Okay, we know what an access control list is. It'll permit something or it denies something. Does that do anything with in-flight or at-rest encryption? Does it do anything with type of management and types of consistencies or the ability to define policies based on what is seen or not seen? No. Firewalls, ACLs, IDSs, IPSs, these are just simply components that are part of a much larger framework. And we need to talk about what that framework is that involves all of these things. Because, again, one of the other challenges of why things just amazingly gets turned off. Think about our firewall technology by itself. There's a lot of firewalls out there that's been out there for a decade. 1 gig connected, 10 gig connected. You may have data flows that are 10 gig by themselves individually. So you're seeing this massive set of elephant flows coming through certain interfaces tied to these security devices, and that bandwidth is ratcheting up by the day. What ends up happening to that appliance? It starts to degrade because of the volume coming in and the processing power that's required to move that data out. And next thing you know, you've created a bottleneck for yourself. What do you do about that? How do I scale? Can I rip and replace? Probably not. So the question is, what else can I do to build a data protection plan and have an evolutionary piece tied to it? So as my requirements grow, I grow with it from a protection standpoint. So no matter what you do, at least in my mind as a technologist, that I'm going to grow and expand with you. Think about that, guys, for a second. When we talk security, I've always thought static, rigid. Here's the rules. Get out of my office. That's just the way it is. Deal with it. We are what we are. And we have accepted it. We've had to, for whatever reasons. But I'm telling you now, we have the ability today as technologists to take the service of data protection and make it just as fluid, just as agile, just as consistent as any of the other services out there that we deploy. Those pieces are there. We just have to think a little bit more about it in a proactive way. So, as we look at recommendations, simple, maintainable, repeatable. Simple, maintainable, repeatable. Software integration, hardware integration, security at the application layer, security in flight, security at rest. All of these pieces are in our conversation. But doing it simply, easy to understand, quickly to implement, easy to manage and maintain, and to adjust. But not simply adjust based on the current problem or situation, but adjust based on the intent. The intent of whom? The intent of my user base. The intent of my mission. And also the intent of my commanders. What do they want, when they want, where they want? And how do I secure that effectively? Because that may change by the hour, by the minute, or by the day. So we've got to keep that simple for that exact reason. Obviously, we don't want to impact network performance. Whether it be massive elephant flows or much smaller mouse flows, it really doesn't matter. Somewhere in between. How does this new data protection strategy cover the gambit? And if I have to make changes, how quickly can I do that, and how can I leverage software as one of my key components for that transition? The right level of protection. It's amazing to me in my own personal conversations with other folks when I've been fortunate to speak to them, is they focus more on top secret information, secret information, FOUO type information. But what about sensitive information? Medical. Basic personal information, home addresses, SSNs, etc. How often is that data stored in the clear, transmitted in the clear, put in databases that can be pulled that's in the clear? Think about the commercial world with Target, Sony, Anthem Healthcare, not to mention some of the other occurrences within the public sector. We need to treat all traffic in different ways based on what we see and what we know are traversing our infrastructures today, and be able to provide appropriate data strategies accordingly. We have to be flexible. We have to adjust. There isn't one button fits all, but yet we can bring them all together in a unified way to be managed and provisioned and distributed appropriately. And obviously, we've got to handle the data rates today, but prepare for tomorrow. It's no different from the evolution of Ethernet over the last 40 years. We're 100 gig today. We'll probably be at 1,000 gig hopefully when I retire. But at the end of the day, we know that plateau is coming. There will be that expectation, and we cannot disband our data protection strategy because we feel that the pipes are too fat. And I don't want to compromise those pipes by deploying a data protection solution that is inferior to that. So these are just some of those high-level recommendations. What are we looking at doing? Ourselves, Brocade, as well as other companies, providing you with terabit per second encryption support for your enterprise. So as we look at integrating solutions into data centers, WANs, CANs, wide area environments, expectations, I'm going to need terabits of encrypted throughput potentially over the long haul. 1 gig rates, 10 gig rates, 40 gig rates, 100 gig rates. It would be nice to have a platform that grows with me, where I can have a modular appliance of my choosing, smaller ones, mid-sized ones, larger ones, where I now have modular solutions I can install in it that gives me gigabits of encrypted throughput. And then I can expand that as I need to, as my requirements dictate. That is available today across multiple companies and multiple platforms. The chipsets today, being able to do this level of encryption in ASIC, in FPGA is real. It's here. It's been here for a while. We're designing solutions around it to provide those types of numbers. Number two, using NFV-based solutions, virtualized routers to secure your customer edge, to secure your tactical arena, to secure certain components within your data center. As we look at data center consolidation, is very powerful. The physical aspects of what we do from a data protection standpoint has a partner. That partner is the software and the network functions virtualized side of the house. It has been maturing over the last 24 months, 36 months, and it's going to continue to mature and grow performance-wise, features-wise, and integration-wise between those physical components and the virtual components. Think of this. Data center consolidation, much larger blade chassis, supporting hundreds, if not thousands of virtual machines on a hypervisor of your choosing. Then taking subsets of those VMs, front-ending those with a virtual router that supports the framework associated with CSFC, 256-bit encryption in flight, The ability to create multiple VPNs. Suite B from an encryption strip standpoint. That's in software. I now have protected a subset of my virtual machines based on those particular customers. It is now a new service, security as a service, that you can now deliver for some of the partners out there and integrators out there to show that we can now do comparable data protection strategies with a minimal number of physical boxes within my topology. Okay? Lower cost, and guess what? If I make a mistake, it's software. We'll move it around as needed. Also, and I want to bring this up, even though there's technologists in the room primarily, you always get the question. You guys are going to come up with some great solutions moving forward. There's no denying that. But don't you hate that you think you got it nailed, and you take it up the chain, and I don't have the dollars for that. Our funding model doesn't fit that. We kind of put our money over here. Okay. There are new acquisition strategies that I would like all the technologists in the room to be familiar with the business people on the other side of the door. Being able to invest without any money down. Growing and expanding on a per interface or per license basis based on the need of your consumer. You don't have to take a swag at it anymore. You can make an educated guess. You can then invest, but then you can then change, constricting and expanding as necessary. I believe that's huge for us because we're constantly redefining, redesigning, reevaluating the requirements of our community, our user community. We can do this today with our data protection conversation. So, what do we expect in the future? The software-defined overlay. Using this model and a set of very generic security data sets to deliver to a true end-to-end data protection strategy involving multiple individual pieces and parts working collaboratively together. We have the APIs. We have the Yang models. We have the data sets. They are available. We're seeing them on the commercial side of the house. They're there. We have the opportunity to leverage them. So now we can create a framework such as a controller or an orchestrator. We now have the individual APIs that allow all these pieces and parts to talk together. So why can I not define a policy, define the rules, define where it starts and where it ends through some type of orchestration framework, use these individual modeling techniques and just simply tweak values, and then apply that to individual firewalls on the edges, IDS, IPS solutions within the enterprise, where I mirror traffic, where I forward traffic, where I encrypt traffic, where I don't encrypt traffic, what level encryption I choose, what encryption strength that I use. Establish all of that up front through orchestration. And then allow the APIs and the modeling to do its work for you and to distribute and change and monitor effectively. Mark my words, from a security standpoint, there will be an app for that. I honestly believe that. We've already started. Think of this, guys. An application. We all deal with much large environments where I have VPNs that span the planet. I have a source, I have a destination on the end of my tunnels. I have hundreds of tunnels. Okay. Do I have a single UI that gives me a full view of that? Where those individual VPN devices are, how they're connected, green good, red bad? There may be something out there. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but being able to create something that simple that gives you that single UI, that single view, and to be able to customize that as you see fit, would that be of value? I believe so. Unified API framework, Yang modeling, a set of very simplistic applications to provide multi-vendor, multi-level data protection collaboration with software as a major overlay, with very strategic products, physical and virtual, as the underlay. So, in closing, call to action, guys. We tend to take data protection as one of those things that, we got a security environment. What do the STIGs say? What do the rules say that were built in 95, 2,000. All right, we got to do that. Or we can do better. We have a framework. We have rules. We have tools. We have new ways of providing flexibility and agility from a data protection standpoint. They're working. They're here. Let's leverage them. Couple things. The survey I mentioned to you about today. Please check us out. Market Connections sponsored the survey. There's a lot of really good content regarding what folks within public sector is talking about when it comes to data protection. I just kind of try to give you a snippet of what some of those responses were. Also, if you haven't or you're not familiar with CSFC in detail and that particular approval list that's out there for those various security products, check that out as well. Because this applies not only to one particular agency, but all of public sector as that framework. And let's focus our attention more proactively when it comes to security. Let's have conversations about how we can elevate the data protection conversation as a security service that applies to multiple products, multiple vendors, working in certain ways day in, day out. We have started to deploy this stuff today, guys. Check out the pavilion. I know you've heard this multiple times this morning. We are trying to build these types of solutions for you as a guide. And there's a couple out there I would love you to take a look at. One that comes to mind is being able to have secure comms across untrusted lines. iPhones, tablets, end-user devices, being able to have a secure connection through the internet that is approvable. We believe that solution exists today, and we've actually built a subset of it using virtualized technology. That's just one solution. I don't want to steal Mr. Wallow's thunder, who's going to come and talk about the demos today, but please check it out. So with that, I say thank you for this 30-minute block. I'm hoping there was something that resonated with you. I'll be running around all day. I would value any insights you may have, questions you may have, and would love to have further conversations with you based on what you're doing and how you're doing it. So, again, thank you, and we'll move on to the next topic. All right, so we are schedule-wise. All right, so we're up for a break. So please, pack up, stretch your legs, grab some food, grab some coffee. I hope if you find any other speakers this morning, please corner them. Throw questions at them, as well as myself. And hopefully we'll reconvene here shortly, and I will kick off the next speaker. All right, guys, thank you.